Imagine finding an old Lincoln Wheat penny in your pocket change that looks like nothing more than one forgotten cent. But what if that tiny copper coin could be worth thousands of dollars? Today, we're diving into some of the most fascinating old Lincoln Wheat pennies. And one of them could have a date, mint mark, condition, or hidden detail that makes collectors stop in their tracks. These pennies may have circulated through American stores, pockets, cash registers, and coin jars for decades, yet some examples can become incredibly valuable when the right characteristics are present. So before you spend another old wheat penny, stop. Check the date, look for the mint mark, study Lincoln's portrait, and flip it over to inspect those famous wheat stalks. Because the difference between 1 cent and a potentially life-changing discovery could be hiding in the smallest detail. Stay with me because the next few coins might completely change the way you look at your old pennies forever. First up, 1951, Lincoln Wheat Penny without mint mark. Let's begin our hunt with a coin that has been sitting quietly in American coin history for more than 7 decades. The 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark. At first sight, this coin might not look extraordinary. It's small, familiar, and carries the same classic Lincoln design that millions of Americans have seen throughout their lives. But when you're searching for valuable coins, the first rule is simple. Never let an ordinary appearance fool you. The coin we're examining today is described as being in circulated very fine condition, with light to moderate, even wear across the surfaces. That means this penny has clearly spent time in circulation, passing through countless hands and transactions, while still retaining important design details. And that is where the story becomes fascinating. On the obverse, Abraham Lincoln's portrait remains the centerpiece. Look closely at Lincoln's hair. Because this coin has experienced circulation, the highest areas of the hair show noticeable but relatively even wear. You can also expect natural hairline circulation scratches across portions of the surface. These marks are important because they tell us something about the coin's journey. This wasn't necessarily a coin locked away in a collection from day one. It was a working piece of American currency, moving through everyday commerce. And every scratch, contact mark, and trace of wear is part of its history. Around the rim, there are also minor surface contacts. These are small imperfections that can happen when coins collide with other coins, fall against hard surfaces, or spend years inside pockets, cash drawers, jars, or coin containers. You may also notice tiny dark oxidation specks. These darker areas can develop naturally as copper reacts with its environment over time. For collectors, however, the important question is not simply whether a coin has marks. The real question is how much detail remains, how natural the surfaces look, and whether the coin has characteristics that separate it from ordinary examples. Now, turn the coin over. This is where the famous wheat penny design gives us another opportunity to inspect the coin. The reverse features the 2 wheat stalks that made these pennies instantly recognizable to generations of Americans. Even though the coin shows circulation wear, the wheat stalk details remain an important feature to examine. Look carefully at the individual lines and contours in the wheat ears. Are the details still clearly visible? Are the inscriptions fully readable? Does the rim remain complete and distinct? These are the kinds of questions experienced collectors ask before deciding whether an old penny deserves closer attention. And remember, the date is only the beginning of the investigation. A coin's potential value can depend on a combination of factors, including condition, rarity, minting characteristics, demand, provenance, and authentication. That is why simply finding a 1951 penny does not automatically mean you have a $30,000 coin. You have to inspect the specific example carefully. The 1951 date itself makes this coin historically interesting because it belongs to the final decades of the classic wheat cent era. Lincoln wheat cents were produced for many years and became one of the most recognizable American coin designs ever made. But collectors know that examples from the same year can have dramatically different values depending on their condition and specific characteristics. That brings us to one of the most important clues on this particular coin, the absence of a mint mark. On Lincoln wheat cents, the mint mark can provide important information about where a coin was produced. A penny without a mint mark generally indicates production at the Philadelphia Mint during this era, because Philadelphia traditionally did not use a mint mark on these cents. That means you should not mistake no mint mark for automatically being an error. This is a critical point for anyone searching through old coins. Sometimes what looks like something missing is actually completely normal for that issue. So if you find a 1951 wheat penny without a mint mark, don't immediately assume it is a rare minting mistake. Instead, examine the entire coin. Check the date. Check the portrait. Inspect the lettering. Study the wheat stalks. Look at the rim. Search for unusual doubling, striking characteristics, planche problems, or other genuine minting anomalies. Then compare the coin with reliable references and, if the potential value is significant, consider professional authentication. Now, let's talk about the $30,000 figure associated with the coin in today's video. Based on the valuation supplied for this example, this particular 1951 no-mint mark wheat penny is being presented with a market value of approximately $30 zeroth. That is an extraordinary number compared with the penny's original 1-cent face value. But there is an important distinction every collector should understand. A claimed or estimated value is not the same thing as a guaranteed sale price. Real-world prices can vary significantly depending on the coin's authenticated grade, eye appeal, rarity, auction demand, buyer interest, and documented sales of comparable specimens. In other words, don't look at a number like $30,000 and assume every 1,951 penny in your collection is worth that amount. Instead, use that number as motivation to investigate. Imagine opening an old coin jar and seeing several wheat cents mixed together. Most people would glance at them and move on. But a knowledgeable collector slows down. They separate the dates. They inspect the mint marks. They look for unusual varieties. They examine the condition. They compare the surfaces. And most importantly, they know that one tiny difference can completely change the collecting story. That is the real lesson behind this 1,951 Lincoln Wheat Penny. It isn't simply about finding an old coin and hoping for a huge payday. It is about learning how American coins were made, understanding what collectors search for, and recognizing details that the average person might overlook. If you happen to find a 1,951 wheat penny without a mint mark, handle it carefully. Avoid cleaning it. Never polish it to make it look newer. Cleaning can permanently damage a coin's original surfaces and may reduce collector interest. Instead, place it somewhere safe, preferably in an appropriate non-damaging coin holder, and examine it under good lighting. A magnifying glass can help you inspect the date, lettering, wheat stalks, rim, and possible minting characteristics. And if the coin appears especially unusual or valuable, professional grading and authentication may be worth considering. So, is every 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark worth $30,000? Absolutely not. But could a specific example deserve serious attention? That is the reason we investigate. The coin's condition, characteristics, authenticity, and market evidence all matter. And that is what makes the world of rare American coins so exciting. A penny that looks almost ordinary can become the starting point for a much bigger discovery. So the next time you encounter an old wheat penny, don't spend it without looking. Turn it over. Study the date. Inspect the details. Compare it carefully. Because the biggest mistake a coin hunter can make is assuming that an old penny is worthless before checking what is actually in front of them. And this 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark, with its circulated very fine appearance, natural wear, surface contacts, oxidation specks, and surviving wheat stalk detail, is exactly the kind of coin that reminds us why collectors keep searching. 1 cent on the face, decades of American history underneath, and potentially, in the right authenticated example and under the right market conditions, a value that can reach far beyond what anyone would expect. Keep watching, because the next coin could have an even more surprising story. Next up, the 1944 D Lincoln Wheat Penny, a coin carrying the D mint mark that identifies it as a Denver Mint issue. At first glance, this penny may look like nothing more than an old circulated piece of pocket change. It has visible wear, circulation marks, and even small areas of greenish surface patina. But experienced collectors know that the real story of a coin is often hidden beneath that ordinary appearance. According to the valuation provided for this example, today's market value is presented at approximately $44,000, an astonishing figure for a coin that originally had a face value of just 1 cent. Now, before you start emptying every penny jar in your house, there's something extremely important to understand. Not every 1944 D wheat penny is automatically worth $44 zeroth. The actual market value of an individual coin depends heavily on authenticity, grade, condition, varieties, errors, provenance, and what collectors are willing to pay for that specific specimen. So think of this number as the value associated with the particular example we're examining, not a guarantee for every 1944D penny you might find. With that said, let's take a much closer look, because this coin has several characteristics that make it fascinating. Start with the obverse. Right there is Abraham Lincoln, the legendary president whose portrait has appeared on the cent for generations. On this particular example, Lincoln's hair and other major high points show moderate, relatively even circulation wear. That tells us the coin spent considerable time in everyday use. The highest portions of the design naturally receive the most contact, so these areas tend to lose sharpness before the protected portions of the design. When you inspect Lincoln's hair, don't simply ask whether it looks shiny or worn. Look at how consistently the wear appears across the highest details. Is the wear smooth and natural? Are the major contours still recognizable? Can you distinguish the remaining lines in Lincoln's hair? These subtle differences can help collectors understand the coin's condition. You may also see natural hairline circulation scratches across the surfaces. These tiny marks can develop through years of handling and contact with other coins or surfaces. They are not automatically evidence of a mint error. In fact, circulation marks are extremely common on old coins that spent decades outside of collections. But their location, depth, and overall appearance still matter when evaluating condition. Move your eyes towards the rim, and you may notice minor surface rim contacts. Again, these are clues to the coin's history. A circulated coin can experience small bumps and impacts during its lifetime, especially when it moves through large quantities of other coins. The rim is one of the areas most likely to receive contact, so small marks here are not surprising. There are also small dark oxidation specks visible on the surface. Because copper is reactive, old copper alloy coins can develop changes in color and surface appearance over many decades. Environmental exposure, storage conditions, humidity, and contact with different materials can all affect the appearance of an old cent. And then there is one particularly interesting feature described on this example: minor surface verdigris, or green patina spots, on the obverse. If you have ever discovered an old copper coin with tiny greenish areas, you may have wondered what caused them. Verdigris is a corrosion product that can develop when copper reacts with moisture and environmental contaminants. On an old coin, these green spots can be visually striking, but they should also be treated carefully. If you find a potentially valuable copper coin with green corrosion, resist the temptation to scrape it, polish it, or aggressively clean it. Amateur cleaning can permanently alter the original surface and potentially hurt the coin's collector appeal. Instead, preserve the coin as you found it and seek knowledgeable professional advice if you believe it may be valuable. Now turn the 1944D penny over, because the reverse is where the famous wheat cent design really comes alive. Two wheat stalks frame the reverse, creating the iconic appearance that gave these pennies their popular name. The wheat ears should be examined closely. Even on a circulated coin, surviving detail can tell us a great deal about how much wear the coin experienced. Look at the individual lines and contours in the wheat stalks. Are the major elements still clearly visible? Is the lettering complete and readable? Does the rim remain strong? A coin in very fine condition should retain a meaningful amount of its original design detail, even though the highest points will show obvious wear. And that distinction is important. A circulated coin does not need to look brand new to be collectible. In fact, many historic American coins exist today because they survived decades of circulation before someone finally recognized their importance. Now, let's step back and consider why 1944 is such an interesting year in American numismatic history. This was the middle of World War II. The United States was deeply involved in the war effort, and the nation's industries were operating under extraordinary pressure. Coins from the 1940s therefore carry more than a date. They carry a connection to one of the most significant periods in modern American history. The 1944 D cent came out of that wartime environment, and its D mint mark gives collectors an immediate clue about its production origin. Look just below Lincoln's portrait on the obverse, where the mint mark area is located. If your coin is supposed to be a 1944 D, the D should be examined carefully under magnification. Make sure the letter is genuine and not the result of damage, alteration, or post-mint manipulation. This is another reason authentication becomes important when a coin is claimed to be worth tens of thousands of dollars. The more valuable a coin becomes, the more important it is to verify exactly what you have. And this is where coin collecting becomes almost like detective work. You have the date, 1944. You have the mint mark, D. You have the Lincoln portrait. You have the wheat reverse. You have circulation wear. You have surface marks. You have oxidation specks. And on this particular example, you also have minor greenish verdigris on the obverse. Now, you bring all those clues together and ask one question. What makes this specific coin different from an ordinary circulated 1944D cent? That is the question every serious collector should ask. The answer cannot simply be because it is old. Age alone does not create enormous value. Millions of old coins exist. What drives exceptional prices is usually a combination of scarcity, condition, rarity, unusual characteristics, collector demand, and verified market history. So if you discover a 1944D wheat penny, don't immediately assume you have found a $44,000 treasure, but definitely don't throw it away without checking it carefully. Compare the date with other 1,944 cents. Examine the mint mark. Inspect the reverse. Look for genuine varieties or errors. Check the overall condition. And if the coin appears unusually valuable, consult a reputable numismatist or professional grading service. One more warning, do not clean it. This is one of the most common mistakes inexperienced collectors make. A person finds an old penny, sees dark toning or green spots, and thinks, I can make this look better. They reach for a household cleaner, abrasive material, polishing cloth, or chemical solution. Unfortunately, that can leave permanent hairlines, unnatural surfaces, and other damage. What looks like dirt to an inexperienced eye can actually be part of the coin's original surface history. A professional collector would much rather examine an untouched coin than one that has been aggressively cleaned. Now imagine the discovery scenario. You're sorting through a collection of old pennies. You come across a wheat cent. You check the date, 1944. You look beneath Lincoln's portrait. There's the D mint mark. You flip it over and see the familiar wheat stalks. The coin is circulated with moderate even wear, small contact marks, some dark oxidation specks, and those distinctive greenish areas on the obverse. You might initially think it's just an old penny, but then you remember what we talked about. You stop. You inspect it under magnification. You photograph both sides. You preserve it carefully. You compare it with reliable references. And suddenly, an ordinary-looking piece of pocket change becomes a coin worth investigating. According to the value supplied for today's video, this particular 1944D Lincoln Wheat Penny is presented at approximately $44,000 in today's market. Again, that figure should be viewed as an example-specific valuation, rather than a promise that every 1944D cent is worth that amount. Actual prices can vary, sometimes dramatically, depending on authentication, grading, condition, rarity, and market demand. But whether the final number is hundreds, thousands, or potentially much more for an exceptional specimen, the lesson remains the same. Check your old coins before you dismiss them. The 1944D Lincoln Wheat Penny is a perfect reminder that American history can hide in the smallest places. A 1-cent coin can survive for more than 80 years, travel through countless hands, collect natural wear and patina, and eventually capture the attention of collectors. So if you have old wheat pennies sitting in a drawer, coin jar, inherited collection, or forgotten box, take another look. Separate the dates. Check the mint marks. Study the surfaces. And never clean a potentially valuable coin just because it looks old. Because somewhere out there, another 1944D wheat penny may be waiting to be discovered, and the person who recognizes its significance could be the one who turns an overlooked piece of pocket change into a remarkable numismatic discovery. Next up, a 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark, a coin that may look ordinary to the untrained eye, but becomes much more interesting when you slow down and examine the smallest details. According to the valuation provided for this example, this coin is being presented with a potential market value of approximately $38 a zeroth. Yes, you heard that correctly, $38,000 for a 1-cent coin. But before you start searching every penny jar in the house, there's something important you need to understand. Not every 1,946 wheat penny is automatically worth thousands of dollars. The exact condition, authenticity, variety, minting characteristics, surface preservation, and collector demand can make an enormous difference. And that is precisely why this particular example deserves a closer look. Start with the obverse. Right at the center is the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage. This 1946 example is described as showing light to moderate, even circulation wear. That means the coin has clearly experienced use, but the wear is distributed relatively consistently across the surface rather than appearing as extreme damage in isolated areas. Look closely at Lincoln's hair. The highest points naturally receive the most contact during circulation, so some softening of the finer hair details is expected. But when examining a potentially valuable specimen, you want to determine exactly how much detail remains. Are the major contours of Lincoln's hair still visible? Are the facial features sharp enough to identify the original design clearly? Does the lettering remain complete? And most importantly, are there any unusual characteristics that might distinguish this particular coin from a normal circulated example? These are the questions that transform casual coin searching into serious collecting. Now pay attention to the surface. The coin is described as having light hairline circulation marks. These fine lines can develop naturally as a coin moves through everyday commerce. Coins can rub against one another, slide across surfaces, or experience countless tiny contacts over decades. To an inexperienced collector, these marks might seem insignificant. But when evaluating condition, every surface characteristic matters. You should never assume that an old coin with a famous date is automatically rare simply because it looks old. Collectors look at the entire package: the date, mint information, strike, surfaces, remaining detail, color, originality, and any legitimate variety or error. Now let's move to the reverse, because that is where this coin has another particularly interesting feature. The reverse carries the iconic two wheat stalks that define the Lincoln Wheat Cent series. These stalks frame the inscriptions and give the coin its unmistakable appearance. On this example, the reverse is described as showing a small green verdigris spot near the word America. That tiny green area deserves attention. Verdigris is generally associated with corrosion or chemical reactions involving copper and its environment, and it can appear as greenish material on copper alloy coins. A small spot does not automatically make a coin rare, nor does it prove that the coin contains an error. In fact, collectors generally treat corrosion very differently from a genuine minting variety. This is why you should never confuse an unusual color or surface spot with a rare mint error. The coin's overall condition and authenticity still have to be established. So if you find a green spot on an old wheat penny, resist the temptation to scrape it away or clean the coin aggressively. Cleaning, polishing, scraping, or using household chemicals can permanently alter the original surface and potentially make the coin less desirable to collectors. Instead, preserve the coin as you found it and have it examined properly if you believe it could be valuable. Now let's talk about the 1946 date. This penny belongs to the post-World War II era, a fascinating period in American history. The United States was transitioning from wartime production back toward peacetime manufacturing, and American coinage was continuing to evolve. A 1946 Lincoln Wheat Cent therefore carries more than just a date. It represents a small piece of the economic and historical environment of post-war America. Millions of pennies could have entered circulation, but individual coins can develop dramatically different conditions over the decades. Some were spent repeatedly and became heavily worn. Others were placed into jars or drawers and survived with much sharper details. Still others were preserved by collectors. That is why two coins with exactly the same year can have completely different values. And this is where the phrase, "without mint mark," becomes important. A 1946 Lincoln Cent without a mint mark is generally associated with Philadelphia production for that issue. Philadelphia cents from this era did not carry a mint mark, so the absence of a mint mark by itself should not be treated as a minting error. This is one of the most common misconceptions among beginning coin hunters. They see a missing letter and immediately think, error coin. But sometimes the missing mint mark is completely intentional. The real challenge is identifying whether your coin has another characteristic that makes it genuinely unusual. Look around the date. Examine the lettering. Study the edges and rim. Compare the thickness and appearance with a known authentic example. Look carefully for legitimate doubled design elements or unusual die characteristics, but be extremely cautious. Online photographs can make ordinary wear look like doubling, and corrosion can create strange shapes that appear unusual under magnification. Professional examination is the safest way to determine whether a potentially valuable coin actually possesses a recognized variety or minting error. Now comes the big question. How could a 1-cent coin possibly be associated with a $38,000 valuation? The answer is that coin values are not determined simply by face value. A coin can become highly collectible because of rarity, condition, historical significance, exceptional preservation, documented auction results, or a combination of these factors. According to the valuation supplied for this video, this specific 1946 no-mint mark wheat penny is being presented at approximately $38,000 in today's market. But remember, that should be treated as an estimated or claimed value for the specific example, not as a guaranteed price for every 1946 penny. Actual market prices can vary significantly. A professional grade, authentication, auction venue, buyer competition, and the exact characteristics of the coin can all affect the final result. And this is exactly why coin collecting is so exciting. You don't need to own a gold coin or a massive silver dollar to discover something interesting. Sometimes the most exciting treasure is sitting at the bottom of a coffee can filled with pennies. Imagine finding an old 1946 wheat cent among ordinary modern coins. You pull it out, notice the wheat stalks on the reverse, and realize that you may be looking at a piece of American history that has survived nearly 80 years. Then you inspect the surface and notice the light circulation wear. You examine Lincoln's hair and discover that the major details are still visible. You turn the coin over and notice that small green verdigris spot near America. Suddenly, what looked like an ordinary penny becomes an object worth investigating. But remember one critical rule: do not clean it. This cannot be emphasized enough. Many people find an old penny and think the best thing they can do is make it shiny. They might use soap, vinegar, metal polish, abrasive material, or even a household cleaning product. That can permanently damage the surface. For a potentially collectible coin, original surfaces are extremely important. A naturally aged copper coin can be far more interesting to collectors than a damaged coin that has been aggressively polished. So preserve it, document it, and seek professional advice if the coin appears promising. Also inspect the rim. A complete rim can help demonstrate that the coin has maintained its overall structural integrity despite circulation. Check the inscriptions too. They should be fully legible, and the design should correspond correctly to the 1946 issue. If something appears dramatically different, don't immediately assume it is valuable. Photograph the coin clearly, compare it with reputable references, and consider authentication. The biggest lesson from this 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny is that small details matter. A date, a surface characteristic, a mint mark, or the legitimate absence of one can change the direction of your investigation. But knowledge is what separates a real discovery from a false alarm. So if you have old wheat cents at home, don't just count them by weight. Separate them by date. Examine both sides. Look for unusual characteristics. Pay attention to condition. And most importantly, never assume that an old penny is worthless simply because it is small. This 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark, showing light to moderate even wear, light hairline circulation marks, and a small green verdigris spot on the reverse near America, is a perfect example of why careful inspection matters. Its supplied valuation of approximately $38,000 makes it an especially dramatic coin for our hunt, but the real excitement comes from understanding what would need to be verified before such a valuation could be taken seriously. So the next time a wheat penny lands in your hand, stop before you spend it. Look at the date. Turn it over. Study the wheat stalks. Inspect the surfaces. And ask yourself one simple question. Could this tiny piece of copper be hiding a story that most people would completely miss? Because when it comes to rare American coins, the smallest details can sometimes create the biggest surprises. Next up, the 1954 Lincoln Wheat Penny with a D mint mark. At first glance, it may look like an ordinary circulated wheat cent, but the combination of its date, Denver mint mark, condition, surface characteristics, and unusual patina makes it an interesting coin to examine. This particular example is described as being in circulated fine condition, showing light to moderate overall wear from years of circulation. And when you're dealing with an old copper coin, every mark tells a story. On the obverse, Abraham Lincoln remains clearly recognizable, but the highest points of the portrait show the expected effects of circulation. The hair and facial details have experienced wear, while the surrounding fields show the signs of a coin that has spent considerable time moving through everyday commerce. There is also a minor rim contact on the obverse. That kind of contact can occur when a coin strikes another hard object or encounters pressure during storage or circulation. By itself, a rim contact does not automatically make a coin rare, but it is an important part of evaluating the coin's overall condition. Now, here is where this 1954D wheat penny becomes especially interesting: the green verdigris or patina spots visible around portions of the obverse. In particular, the described greenish areas appear near the phrase, "In God We Trust," around Lincoln's bust, and close to the date. If you discover green material on an old copper coin, do not immediately grab a cloth, brush, chemical cleaner, or polishing solution. That could permanently damage the surface. Green corrosion-like material on copper can be associated with chemical reactions involving moisture, contaminants, storage materials, or other environmental factors. Collectors generally want to know whether the color is stable natural patina or active corrosion, and that distinction can be extremely important. So this is a coin that should be handled carefully rather than aggressively cleaned. Now, let's move our attention to the date. 1954. This places the coin in the final years of the Lincoln wheat cent era, a period when the classic wheat stalk reverse was still part of American everyday currency. And then there is the small but important D mint mark, indicating Denver production. That tiny letter can be one of the first things a collector checks when examining a wheat penny. When you find a 1954D, you should always compare it with other examples from the same date and mint. Look at the date placement, lettering, strike, surfaces, and overall preservation. If something appears unusual, document it before assuming it is an error or variety. A genuine minting variety needs to be supported by recognizable characteristics, not simply by damage or circulation wear. Turn the coin over and you'll see the classic wheat cent reverse. Two wheat stalks frame the inscriptions, creating one of the most iconic designs in American coinage. Even on a circulated example, the reverse can provide valuable information about the coin's condition. Study the wheat stalks carefully. Are the lines visible? How much detail remains in the wheat ears? Is the rim complete? Are the words 1 cent and United States of America fully legible? These details help establish how much of the original design survives after decades of handling. The more detail that remains, the more attractive a circulated coin can become to collectors, although actual market value still depends on the complete combination of factors. Now comes the number that makes this coin particularly attention-grabbing. The valuation provided for this specific example is approximately $49,000 in today's market. That is an incredible figure when you remember that the coin originally represented just 1 cent of purchasing power. But there is an important collector warning here. $49,000 should be treated as the stated valuation for this particular example, not as a guaranteed value for every 1954D wheat penny. Coin prices are highly dependent on authentication, grading, preservation, rarity, demand, and documented sales. A typical circulated 1954D wheat cent should not automatically be assumed to have a 5-figure value simply because it shares the same date and mint mark. What makes an individual coin potentially exceptional has to be established through careful examination and credible market evidence. And this is exactly why coin collecting can become so addictive. You might start with a handful of old pennies and discover that every coin has something different to teach you. One may have a different mint mark. Another may have stronger details. Another may have an unusual die characteristic. Another may have environmental damage. And occasionally, one may possess a combination of characteristics that makes collectors stop and investigate further. With this 1954D example, the green verdigris is especially important. Green material on copper should never be treated as a guaranteed sign of rarity. In fact, depending on its nature and severity, it can negatively affect the coin's condition and value. That means the right approach is not to celebrate the green spots as automatically valuable, but to determine what they actually are. Is it stable patina? Is it environmental residue? Is it active corrosion? Has the surface underneath been affected? These are questions a professional numismatist or grading service can help answer. If you find a coin like this in your own collection, the safest approach is simple. Don't clean it. Don't scrape the green areas. Don't use vinegar. Don't use baking soda. Don't use abrasive materials. Don't polish the copper until it shines. Even though cleaning may make the coin look brighter to the eye, it can destroy the original surface and potentially make the coin less desirable to collectors. Instead, protect the coin from additional moisture and store it in a proper inert holder designed for coins. Then, if you believe it has significant value, seek an expert opinion. Another important clue is the coin's fine condition. Circulated fine means the coin has experienced substantial use, with noticeable wear across the design, but major elements remain identifiable. For a 1954D wheat penny, that means you should focus on the overall preservation rather than expecting the sharp details found on an uncirculated specimen. The fact that this example has light to moderate wear and minor rim contact gives us a picture of a coin that has clearly lived a long life in circulation. Imagine this penny moving through American stores, cash registers, pockets, and coin jars during the 1950s and the decades that followed. It could have been spent on something that cost only a few cents, carried home in someone's pocket, placed into a drawer, and eventually forgotten. Decades later, it could become the subject of a collector's investigation. That is the magic of old coins. They are tiny pieces of physical history. And the 1954D Lincoln Wheat Penny is a perfect example of why you should examine the details before making assumptions. The date matters. The Denver mint mark matters. The condition matters. The surface matters. The patina matters. And the authenticity of any extraordinary valuation matters most of all. If someone tells you that their 1954D penny is worth $49,000, the next question should not be, where can I sell it? The first question should be, what evidence supports that valuation? Look for professional grading, auction records, comparable sales, and expert authentication. That approach protects collectors from unrealistic internet price claims and helps separate genuine rarity from ordinary coins with exaggerated valuations. So, when you search through your old wheat pennies, remember this 1954D example. A tiny D mint mark can immediately tell you where the coin came from. A worn Lincoln portrait can reveal decades of circulation. A minor rim contact can tell part of the coin's physical story. And those green verdigris spots near "In God We Trust," Lincoln's bust, and the date tell you that the surface needs careful attention, not aggressive cleaning. According to the valuation supplied for today's video, this particular coin is presented at approximately $49,000, but that figure depends entirely on the specific coin and its authenticated market status. So don't assume every 1954D wheat penny is a fortune. Instead, learn to identify the clues that make one worth a closer look. Because the real treasure hunt isn't simply finding an old penny, it's knowing why that penny deserves attention. And if you have a jar of wheat cents sitting somewhere in your home, now might be the perfect time to take them out, sort them by date and mint mark, and inspect them one by one. You never know which forgotten coin might turn out to have a story worth thousands, or, in an extraordinary authenticated case, potentially much more. Next up, a 1950 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark, described as being in circulated extremely fine condition, with moderate but generally even wear, natural hairline circulation scratches, a minor nick along the obverse rim, and small dark oxidation specks located inside the O on the reverse. At first glance, this may look like nothing more than another old penny from the middle of the 20th century. But when you start examining the individual characteristics, the story becomes much more interesting. And according to the valuation provided for this coin, its estimated market value is approximately $40 zeroth. That is an astonishing difference from its original 1-cent face value. But before you start searching every penny jar in your house, there is something extremely important to understand. Not every 1950 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark is worth $40 zeroth. The specific condition, authenticity, rarity, variety, market demand, and documented sales history all have to be considered. So let's slow down and examine this coin like a serious collector would. Start on the obverse, where Abraham Lincoln's portrait dominates the design. Lincoln's face, hair, coat, and surrounding lettering are all important areas to inspect. Because this example has circulated, the highest points of Lincoln's portrait naturally show moderate wear. The hair is one of the first places where circulation can become visible. The fine lines and raised details gradually soften as the coin spends years moving through pockets, cash registers, coin rolls, and countless transactions. Yet an extremely fine example should still preserve substantial design detail compared with a heavily worn coin. That distinction matters. A coin can have visible circulation marks and still retain considerable collector appeal if its major features remain sharp and identifiable. Next, examine the surfaces. The description mentions hairline circulation scratches, and these tiny lines can be especially noticeable when light moves across the copper surface. They are part of the coin's circulated history and can help distinguish a genuine circulated specimen from an artificially altered or heavily cleaned coin. This is also why you should never aggressively polish an old penny. A shiny appearance does not automatically mean higher value. In fact, cleaning can destroy the natural surface characteristics collectors want to preserve. The next detail is the minor obverse rim nick. Look carefully around the outer edge of the coin. A small contact mark or nick can occur when the penny encounters another hard object during circulation or storage. For a collector, the location and severity of such a mark matter. A tiny rim contact is very different from a major rim break, broad strike, clipped planche, or other legitimate minting error. This distinction is incredibly important because ordinary damage and genuine mint errors are not the same thing. A damaged coin may simply have been struck or hit after leaving the mint, while a true minting error can have a completely different origin and collector significance. Now turn the coin over, because the reverse gives us one of the most interesting visual clues in this particular example. The famous 2 wheat stalks frame the inscriptions, creating the classic wheat cent design that millions of Americans recognize instantly. Look closely at the wheat ears and surrounding fields. Even with circulation wear, the surviving lines and contours can tell us a great deal about the coin's condition. Then focus on the small dark oxidation specks described as appearing inside the O on the reverse. These tiny dark areas may be easy to miss without magnification, but that is exactly why close inspection matters. Copper naturally reacts with oxygen, moisture, and environmental exposure, and dark spots can develop over decades. The important thing is to determine whether such marks are natural surface toning or something unusual. Again, collectors should avoid assuming that every dark spot is an error. Most small discolorations are simply part of the coin's natural surface history. The fascinating part of this 1950 wheat penny is the combination of its age, design, condition, and the possibility that the individual specimen may possess characteristics that elevate it above an ordinary example. The 1950 date places the coin firmly in the later period of the Lincoln Wheat Cent series. By this point, the wheat penny had already become an iconic part of American commerce. These coins were everywhere, used in stores, carried in pockets, saved in jars, and eventually forgotten in drawers and boxes. More than 7 decades later, collectors are still searching through those same collections hoping to discover something special. One of the first things to check on a 1950 wheat penny is the mint mark area. If there is no mint mark beneath Lincoln's portrait, that generally indicates Philadelphia production for this era. That absence should not automatically be treated as a rare error. Philadelphia coins commonly lacked mint marks during this period. Therefore, the phrase "without mint mark" is an identification clue, not by itself proof that the coin is an error. This is one of the biggest misconceptions among new coin hunters. They see a blank mint mark area and think something must have gone wrong at the mint. But sometimes the blank area is exactly what the coin should have. The real challenge is identifying whether there is something else unusual about the specimen. Could there be a variety? Could there be an unusual strike? Could the coin have an uncommon die characteristic? Could its authenticated grade be much stronger than its appearance suggests? These are the questions that turn casual coin searching into serious numismatics. And this is where the $40,000 valuation becomes especially intriguing. The figure supplied for today's example is approximately $40,000 in today's market. If you were to discover a coin that might command a price anywhere near that level, you would want to verify every detail before making any assumptions. Professional authentication would be particularly important because high-value coins can attract counterfeits, altered dates, artificial toning, and other forms of manipulation. A genuine coin should be examined by qualified experts, and a high-value claim should ideally be supported by reliable market records or an established grading service. Remember, the coin itself is only part of the equation. Condition can dramatically influence collector demand. A lightly worn example can be worth much more than a heavily circulated example of the same date. That is why terms such as very fine, extremely fine, about uncirculated, and mint state are important in coin collecting. They describe levels of preservation and help collectors compare specimens. This particular coin is described as circulated extremely fine, meaning it has seen meaningful use but supposedly retains a stronger amount of detail than a typical heavily circulated penny. The moderate even wear is important because uneven or severe damage can affect desirability. The hairline scratches, rim nick, and oxidation specks should all be documented rather than hidden. Transparency is essential when evaluating a collectible coin. If you find a coin like this, resist the temptation to make it look better. Do not scrub it. Do not dip it in household chemicals. Do not use metal polish. Do not scratch the surface to remove dark spots. Every one of those actions could permanently alter the coin. Instead, handle it by the edges, keep the original surfaces intact, and use magnification and proper lighting for inspection. You can even photograph both sides and compare the images with trusted numismatic references. Now imagine the moment of discovery. You're sorting through a collection of old pennies. Most are ordinary. Some are heavily worn. A few have interesting dates. Then you notice a 1950 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark. You turn it over. The wheat stalks are still visible. You inspect the lettering. You notice the small, dark oxidation specks inside the O. You look at Lincoln's hair and realize the detail is much stronger than you expected for a circulated coin. Suddenly, that ordinary-looking penny becomes a candidate for further research. That is the excitement of coin hunting. It's not guaranteed treasure, it's the possibility of discovery. And sometimes the most valuable lesson is not the price itself, but learning what separates a common coin from a truly desirable specimen. So if you have old wheat pennies sitting in a jar, don't rush to spend them. Separate the dates. Check the mint mark locations. Inspect the condition. Look for legitimate varieties and errors. Compare your findings with reputable references. And if something appears genuinely exceptional, get it professionally authenticated before believing an extraordinary valuation. Because this 1950 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark, described in circulated extremely fine condition, and valued in this video at approximately $40,000, is a powerful reminder that the smallest coin in your collection can sometimes deserve the biggest investigation. 1 cent may be printed on the face, but the history, rarity, condition, and collector demand behind a particular specimen can tell a completely different story. So, before you empty that old penny jar, check the dates, check the details, and most importantly, never assume an old Lincoln Wheat Penny is worthless until you know exactly what you have.